Tonight, more jobs were lost last month than any month in the past 5 years. If you're worried, you're not alone.
I don't know, Americans are concerned about our economy. So am I.
Experts say it's the clearest sign yet that we're in a recession. I'm Katie Couric. Also tonight, a prescription for ripoffs. Hospitals replacing drugs with ones that cost twice as much. Meet the whistleblower who stopped it. And a real American hero.
He's got heart. I mean, he's got the heart the size of a lion.
High school wrestler Dustin Carter goes to the mat.
This is the CBS Evening News with Katie Couric.
Good evening, everyone. Well, the numbers don't lie. Today, President Bush said he's concerned about the slowing economy after the Labor Department reported that America lost 63,000 jobs in February, the biggest monthly job loss in 5 years. The unemployment rate actually went down by 1/10 of a point to 4.8%, but economists say that's only because hundreds of thousands have stopped looking for work. And many of those same economists are using the R word more and more. Here's Anthony Mason.
In Tiffin, Ohio, this American Standard plant was shuttered in December. Hundreds lost their jobs.
All of our business now is being made in Mexico, Brazil, China.
It was the start of a wave of private sector layoffs, but the more than 60,000 job cuts in February are especially alarming because they were spread across the economy. Manufacturing lost jobs. So did the construction industry and the retail sector.
No more evidence is needed. The economy is in recession. We've lost private sector jobs since December. That's a recession.
President Bush said today help is on the way.
But we recognized the problem early and provided the economy with a booster shot.
That booster shot will come when tax rebate checks are mailed out to 130 million families beginning in May. But will it be enough?
My fear is actually that we could turn into a W-shaped recession.
The W-shaped recession David Weiss describes would see the economy dipping into recession, bouncing back behind the tax rebates, but sliding again after those checks are spent, before we have a real recovery.
I think things will start to turn, but it's going to be a slow turn.
Gas prices aren't helping. This California station is already charging $5 a gallon. With crude hitting another all-time high today, the price at the pump could soar by the summer.
In fact, the increase in our gasoline bill will be just about the size of those tax rebate checks. So we could take that tax rebate check and just put it into our gas tank. Clearly, that doesn't do a whole lot of good for the economy.
All that's left a cloud here over Wall Street, where the Dow fell below 12,000 today, closing at its lowest level in nearly a year and a half. Katie?
All right, Anthony Mason. Anthony, thank you. Meanwhile, some top executives got an earful today on Capitol Hill. They continued to rake it in, even as their companies were hemorrhaging money in the mortgage crisis. Chip Reed has more.
Their critics say they're the face of the mortgage meltdown. CEOs who made millions while their companies lost billions, and thousands of families who borrowed from them lost their homes.
It seems like CEOs hit the lottery when their companies collapse.
Angelo Mazzillo, co-founder of Countrywide Financial, made more than $120 million last year by selling company stock, while Countrywide was losing $1.6 billion. Stanley O'Neill, former CEO of Merrill Lynch, got a $161 million retirement package, and Charles Prince, former head of Citigroup, got a $10 million bonus, even though both men's companies lost billions in bad mortgages.
It's appalling that people should get paid like this for the kind of performance that they turned in.
But the CEOs argued that their compensation was earned in prior years when they successfully guided their companies.
In short, as our company did well, I did well.
And committee Republicans all but leaped to their defense.
No. Do you profit by people losing their homes?
By the billions of dollars that we have written off, the answer is clearly no.
I don't see a villain here. I'd like to. I'd like to find somebody I could blame.
Some Republicans said today's hearing was nothing more than a search for scapegoats in the mortgage crisis. They said there's plenty of blame to go around, even right here in Congress. Katie?
Chip Reed. reporting from Washington. To politics now, and a power outage today. One of Barack Obama's top advisors quit after making an insulting comment about Hillary Clinton. Here is our CBS News Campaign 08 notebook. Harvard professor and Pulitzer Prize-winning author Samantha Power told a Scottish newspaper that Senator Clinton is a monster who will stoop to anything. Today, Power apologized and called her comments inexcusable. Clinton didn't mention the comment today while campaigning in Mississippi, but she did discuss the possibility of a dream ticket of Clinton and Obama.
I've had people say, I wish I could vote for both of you. Well, that might be possible someday.
Overseas, this was a day of mourning in Jerusalem for 8 Israeli seminary students murdered by a Palestinian gunman. Thousands of mourners attended funerals for the victims. One of the dead was a 16-year-old born in the U.S. Hamas officials took back their claim of responsibility for the massacre. As for the gunman, his family said he was very religious, but not a militant. Back in this country, a murder mystery involving a college student who showed so much promise. Police in North Carolina said today they have no suspects and no motive in the shooting death of Eve Carson. As Michelle Miller reports, it was apparently a random act, and it's devastated an entire college community.
Okay, and you said you heard gunshots? 3 times.
It was 5 a.m. when the first calls came in. Minutes later, 22-year-old Eve Carson was found shot to death, lying in the street of an upscale Chapel Hill neighborhood. The University of North Carolina senior, a popular pre-med major, was president of the student body, valedictorian of her high school, and even managed to tutor elementary kids in her spare time.
A young, vibrant life was just snuffed out for no reason.
Carson's car was discovered parked and empty about a mile from the crime scene. Police have no suspect and no motive. She was last seen alive at home.
My understanding is that when her roommates left about 1:30 in the morning, she was at the house studying.
Her death shattered the illusion of safety in a small college town as thousands gathered Thursday night to remember how she lived.
Everyone that ever met Eve adored her. I mean, this can attest to that. She had such a positive impact on everybody.
A $25,000 reward has been offered to solve what police call a random act of violence. But to those wearing Carolina blue, finding her killer is personal. Michelle Miller, CBS News, New York.
Turning now to health news, and a report out today that shows senior citizens are at risk from something that happens thousands of times a day, falling down. 5.8 million seniors report they have fallen in the past 3 months. In the year 2000 alone, the medical bills added up to $19 billion. So what can we do to protect our parents and grandparents? Here's CBS medical correspondent Dr. John LaPook.
When Shirley Keegan started falling, life as she knew it took a tumble.
It's very frightening. You don't know you're going to fall. It's very unexpected. And as you're going down, you're saying, oh no, you know, in your mind, you're saying, oh no.
A CDC survey released today found over a 3-month period, 1.8 million adults hurt themselves from falling.
It included the whole range of injuries, so it could be a bruise all the way up to a head or hip fracture.
10 to 25% of patients who fracture a hip die within a year. Many more, up to 75%, never get back to normal.
Well, falls can have very serious consequences. They can definitely impact a senior's quality of life and interfere with their ability to live independently.
Along with today's report, the CDC is launching a new initiative with specific steps to help patients prevent falls.
And what are some of those recommendations, John?
Well, some of them are obvious. In the home, have good lighting, make sure the floors aren't slippery. And some of them, though, are not that obvious. There are embarrassing things that patients don't want to do. Install a grab bar for the shower so they don't fall. Raise the toilet seat. And some patients really need a walker or a cane. And these things may be embarrassing, but they sure beat falling.
And important steps to independence. John LaPook. John, thank you. There is much more CBS News ahead, including the bee mystery, why honeybees may be an endangered species, and how America's farmers are getting stung. But up next, how this doctor saved your money by blowing the whistle on a hospital's prescription for profit. When a doctor writes a prescription, you're supposed to get that specific drug, but sometimes hospitals switch prescription drugs in order to make money for themselves and the drug companies, and that can be dangerous for patients and costly to taxpayers. Cheryl Atkinson reports on this medical mischief and one doctor's cure as we follow the money.
That big a difference. Does that sound fair?
William LaCourte is no ordinary doctor.
It's amazing that any pharmaceutical reps call on me at all.
He's been fighting a one-man battle against a widespread medical practice.
Where's Melanie?
One that puts profit ahead of health and costs you hundreds of millions of dollars.
I may just be a big pain in the ass.
It started when he caught Memorial Hospital in New Orleans doing something very odd. Every time he prescribed Zantac, the hospital changed it to Pepcid. Both are acid blockers that can prevent dangerous internal bleeding.
That must have piqued your curiosity that the drug you were prescribing was being switched out.
I said, why is it I'm ordering one drug and a totally different drug is being given? And I was told therapeutic interchange.
Therapeutic interchange meant the hospital was switching virtually all antacid prescriptions to Pepcid. And it wasn't a meaningless change. While Dr. LaCourte says Pepcid is a good drug, it was given in doses that were too strong for some patients, making them very sick. One even went into a coma. When he tried to find out why so many were being given Pepcid, he discovered Memorial Hospital had made what's called a market share deal with Merck, the maker of the drug. As long as 80% of patients were on Pepcid, Merck gave the hospital a deep discount.
The hospital's task was to get almost all of the patients who needed that type of drug on the Merck brand drug.
Yes.
Dr. LaCourte complained to everyone he could think of without result. Finally, he got the feds involved by proving taxpayers were being defrauded. It turns out that Pepcid cost twice as much as Zantac, and since many patients were on Medicaid or Medicare, taxpayers covered the extra cost. The fight took 12 long years, but Merck recently agreed to pay back taxpayers $650 million for deals to get hospitals nationwide to favor not only Pepcid, but also Merck drugs Zocor and Vioxx.
We're going to have a nice glass of wine.
Under whistleblower law, Dr. LaCourte will get a sizable payment from the recovered money.
You say this is not just happening with Merck and a hospital in New Orleans.
This is a widespread practice with multiple medications. This is business as usual for the hospitals in the and drug companies in the United States of America today.
Dr. LaCourte says he'll keep up the fight.
Maybe we can finally put an end to, quote, therapeutic interchange.
And he's the doctor with just the bedside manner to do it. Cheryl Atkinson, CBS News, Washington.
Now, a follow-up on airline safety. Yesterday, the FAA announced a record $10 million fine against Southwest Airlines for flying planes that hadn't been inspected. Today, FAA officials admitted they broke their own rules by allowing those flights to continue. Meanwhile, spring begins in less than 2 weeks, but don't tell that to Mother Nature. A flurry of late-season snowstorms in Texas dumped up to 9 inches in some areas and turned the early morning commute into a daredevil drive for this 18-wheeler in Denton, Texas. The big rig spun out of control, but no one was hurt. When we come back, honeybees are dying by the billions. What's wiping them out? Now to a real mystery. What's killing the honeybees? The USDA says more than a third of the nation's bees, almost 27 billion, have disappeared in the last year. And that's not just bad for beekeepers. A bee shortage could hurt crops and leave a lot of space on supermarket shelves. John Blackstone has the story.
In California, the almond orchards are in blossom and millions of honeybees are at work, pollinating, doing a job only they can do. Almonds are the first big bloom of the season and the first big test of honeybee health.
It's not a vibrant hive. It's not full of bees. A hive this time of year should just be busting with bees. And this is just a scrawny little beehive.
Brett 80, whose family runs the largest beekeeping operation in the country, says bees are dying at least as fast as they did last year.
It's off the chart this year. It's not a sustainable thing, what's happening now.
What's happening in the almond orchards doesn't bode well for crops everywhere that require pollination, where bees transfer pollen between blossoms, making it possible for fruits and vegetables to grow. U.S. Department of Agriculture researcher Jeff Pettis has been tracking the bee die-off.
Certainly if the bees aren't in almonds, then they're not going to be available for apples and pears and the vine crops, the fruits and vegetables that we need.
What is called colony collapse disorder hit beekeepers in more than half the country last spring. Now it's spread to all but a handful of states. Hives can go from healthy and active like this to dead and gone. Theories on what's bugging the bees include mites and viruses, pesticides, poor nutrition, maybe all of those together.
That's been the frustrating part. We know some things that are contributing, but we can't point to a single factor as a cause.
2 years ago, Louise Rosberg had nearly 1,000 hives. Now she has just 200 and is struggling to stay in business.
What else am I going to do? What else? I love doing bees. I've done them for so long.
But Rosberg has lost so much income, her house is in foreclosure. Even the spring blossoms don't seem to bring much hope.
I have lost my home. I have lost my vehicle. Let's see. And I'm living with a friend right now, so it really helps. I'm sorry.
The shortage of bees has even led to bee rustling. Hundreds of hives have been stolen, costing beekeepers thousands. The thefts from the almond orchards reflects just how important bees are.
Bees are a vital element to the production of food in this country, and if we can't feed ourselves, then we got a problem.
As an essential link in the food chain, the hard-working bee has suddenly become the weakest link. John Blackstone, CBS News, Modesto, California.
And here's a reminder to spring ahead this weekend. In most states, daylight saving time begins this Sunday at 2 a.m., so you'll need to set your clocks ahead 1 hour. Steve Hartman is next with Assignment America and the story of Dustin, the Determined. Finally tonight, the story of a young man from Ohio with steely determination. For him, nothing is easy, but anything is possible. Here's Steve Hartman with tonight's Assignment America.
This is not one of those typical stories about the sweet boy who overcame his disabilities. It's a story about an ornery brat who did it just the same.
I was a troublemaker. Me and Dad used to fight a lot. I was very disrespectful.
I think he was just trying to fit in with somewhere. That's what I think.
Okay. Dustin Carter wasn't born troubled or disabled. But shortly after this video was taken, he contracted a rare blood disease that eventually claimed his limbs.
Crystal!
All 4 of them. After that, Dustin grew into a straight F student with a passion for apathy. Until 8th grade, when he found, of all things, wrestling.
I tried to picture how he would do it, and I thought, well, at least he'd be out there, practicing, participating with the kids. He'll probably never wrestle.
But he did wrestle.
And what happened? I got beat pretty bad.
Well, they just get out there and just, throw him around on the mat.
Dustin lost just about every time he set his torso in the ring. But the competition brought out a side of Dustin no one had ever seen before.
He's got heart. He's got the heart the size of a lion.
Nate Horn is the coach here at Hillsborough High School.
He can persevere through anything. That's me. I'm a pretty determined person. I'll sit at something and work at it for hours till I get it.
By all accounts, by high school, Dustin had become a model of self-discipline. His grades went up, and he actually started winning. Winning more than anyone other than Dustin could have ever imagined.
There's not one day in my life, ever since I started wrestling, that I have not dreamed of going to the state tournament.
Carter of Hillsborough.
And last week, it happened.
Congratulations on qualifying to state.
Dustin Carter made it to the state tournament.
Oh, it was amazing. I looked up, I looked around, and then I got scared. I was like, I feel really small right now.
The Ohio tournament is actually one of the most competitive in the nation. And yet even here, Dustin was able to pull off a win.
Right there, right there, right there!
That move and this victory placed Dustin in the top 16 in his age group.
Nice job, man. Nice job.
His final match, the last of his high school career, was a real knockdown dragout.
Watch the level!
And although he lost the bout, he so won the audience.
I look up and everybody's on their feet. And immediately my eyes just started watering.
Dustin says when you're disabled like he is, it's hard to get used to all the staring. But this kind of staring, that he could get used to.
From here, Dustin plans to go to college and wrestle, and eventually he'd like to go back to his high school and coach wrestling there.
You get me every Friday, Steve. Well, how do his opponents feel about wrestling against him?
Well, I asked him about that, and he said at first they were a little embarrassed, but after a while, they got to know how good he was, and there was no embarrassment whatsoever.
All right.
And he's good competition.
Yeah, he's amazing. All right, well, I get my act together. Tell us about next week.
Next week. I taught my dog to speak, and I thought that was a good trick. But a dog teaching a boy to speak is no trick, and no joke either. The story next week. Until then, if you've seen a good story, even in your local paper, that you think might make an interesting assignment in America, please go to cbsnews.com and tell me about it.
All right, Steve, thanks so much. And that's the CBS Evening News. I'm Katie Couric in New York. Thank you for watching this week. Have a great weekend. Good night.